Nadia never thought silence could scream so loud. Her house echoed with it, morning coffee sipped without eye contact, dinners eaten with the TV louder than their voices. Her husband, Danish, had become a stranger she shared a bed with. It wasn't cruelty. It was neglect, the kind that withers slowly, quietly, like a flower left in the dark. It was raining when her car stalled on the edge of town. The wipers squeaked, matching her sigh. She stepped out, phone in hand, scanning for a signal. The universe answered instead in the form of a man across the street, rolling a garage door open. He noticed her, gave a small nod, and walked over without asking. "You all right?" he asked. She hesitated. Car's dead. Signal's worse. He knelt by the hood, hands practiced. "I can take a look. I run the shop right here." She almost said no, out of habit, but nodded. "Thanks." As he worked, she watched. Noticed things, the quiet patience in his movements, the faint scar under his eye, the way he didn't fill the silence with meaningless words. After 10 minutes, the engine coughed back to life. "It's an old battery. Might need replacing soon." She nodded. "What do I owe you?" He waved it off. "Just a good review if I ever fix your car properly." She smiled, genuinely for the first time in weeks. "I'm Nadia." "Rayhan." There was a moment where neither stepped back. No flirtation, just recognition. Something familiar in their distance. Back home, Danish asked if the car was fixed without looking up from his laptop. She said yes, and he replied with an absent hum. That was it. Over the next week, Nadia found herself thinking about Rayhan. Not romantically, at least, that's what she told herself. More like remembering a song she hadn't heard in years. The next Saturday, her car made a noise. Not a real issue, just a reason. She drove to Rayhan's shop. He looked surprised, but pleased. "You again." "I thought I heard something off in the engine." He looked, then gave her a look. "Nothing wrong. But I can pretend to find something if you need 5 minutes away." They talked. About nothing. About everything. Rayhan wasn't trying to impress her. He just listened. That, in itself, was rare. She left with her car untouched, but her chest a little fuller. That night, lying beside her husband, Nadia stared at the ceiling. She wasn't in love with Rayhan. She barely knew him. But for the first time in a long time, someone had made her feel seen. And that terrified her more than anything. Nadia started visiting the garage more often. Sometimes with actual car concerns. Most times without. She'd bring coffee. Rayhan never questioned it. He just handed her a stool and wiped his hands before sitting across from her. They didn't flirt. Not in the obvious way. Their connection built in the quiet moments, when she handed him a coffee and their fingers brushed, when they laughed at something small, and it lingered too long. There was an ease, a safety. It unnerved her. One rainy afternoon, she admitted more than she meant to. "Sometimes I forget what it feels like to be noticed." Rayhan didn't interrupt, didn't offer cliches, just nodded like he understood something deeper. He eventually shared his own story, how he'd once been married, how she left him for someone else. "I wasn't angry," he said, "mostly just surprised how fast love disappears when it stops being fed." Nadia didn't respond. She didn't have to. The look in her eyes was answer enough. Days passed. Each visit became longer. She checked the time less often. She laughed more. With Rayhan, she wasn't a wife, a woman trying to hold a crumbling home together. She was just herself, whoever that was anymore. One afternoon, he gave her a book. Just a small paperback, something he said reminded him of their talks. Inside was a note. "You don't have to disappear just because someone stopped looking." She read it alone in her car, holding back tears. It had been years since anyone wrote something just for her. At home, she grew careful, locked her phone, deleted texts, told Danish she was running errands when she wasn't. He never questioned it. That made it worse. The guilt crept in quietly, not because of anything that happened, but because of everything she wanted to happen. She told herself it was innocent. She hadn't done anything wrong. But the lie tasted bitter each time. Rayhan never pushed. He never crossed a line. But his silence invited her closer. He was always there, always kind, always waiting, not for anything physical, but for truth she hadn't said out loud. One day, he asked softly, "Do you ever think about leaving?" She didn't answer. Her silence was its own confession. That night, she stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She didn't recognize the woman looking back. Not because she had changed, but because she had finally remembered what she used to be. She knew the line was close. She felt the wind from it. Still, she kept walking. It happened on a night when everything inside her broke. Danish had come home late, reeking of a perfume she didn't wear. When she asked, he said she was imagining things. When she pressed, he left the room. No explanation. No apology. Just absence again. She got in her car without thinking. No destination. Her hands gripped the wheel until her knuckles turned white. She drove aimlessly until she found herself outside Rayhan's shop. The lights were off, but he answered the door anyway, surprised but concerned. He didn't ask why she was there. He just let her in. They sat in silence. Then she broke. Words poured out, her fears, her loneliness, the nights she lay awake pretending not to notice her husband turning away. Her voice cracked under the weight of years she had swallowed. Rayhan listened the way no one else ever had. At some point, the space between them disappeared. No decision. No plan. Just gravity pulling two lonely people into the same orbit. It wasn't rushed or frantic. It was quiet, full of pauses and unspoken understanding. There was no triumph, no fireworks. Just warmth. Just being held by someone who meant it. When it was over, she lay beside him, eyes open, heart racing. Guilt seeped in like cold air. She sat up, dressed quickly, and whispered a thank you she couldn't explain. Rayhan didn't stop her. He just watched her go, a flicker of hurt in his eyes. Back in her car, she stared at the steering wheel for a long time. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rayhan. "I'm here, no matter what." She read it twice, then deleted it. The next morning, everything looked the same, but felt different. Danish was in the kitchen, scrolling his phone. He didn't ask where she'd been. She didn't offer anything. They moved around each other, like ghosts. Rayhan texted again later in the day. She didn't reply. She couldn't. She wasn't ready to face what she'd done, or what it meant. She didn't regret the moment itself, only the confusion it left behind. Her heart felt torn between relief and shame. For days, she avoided both of them. Danish didn't notice. Rayhan did. He called once. She watched the screen, let it ring out. Her silence said more than words could. She buried the night in her mind, telling herself it was a mistake. A one-time collapse. But the truth settled in her chest like a stone. It hadn't been a mistake. It had been a choice. One she made because, for once, she wanted to feel real. And now, she couldn't undo it. 3 months passed like fog. Nadia didn't see Rayhan again. Not because she didn't want to, but because the version of herself who stepped into his arms no longer fit into the life she was trying to rebuild. Danish eventually found out. Not through confrontation, but through carelessness, a missed call, a half-deleted message. He didn't yell. He just packed a bag, left a note, and never came back. There was no dramatic ending. No closure. Just silence where a marriage used to be. Friends withdrew. Some whispered. Others judged. Nadia didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. What would she say? That she broke because she'd been invisible for too long? She focused on work, routine, staying upright. The bed felt too big. The house too quiet. Yet somewhere inside the wreckage, there was a strange stillness. Not peace. She hadn't earned that yet. But the beginning of something less fragile. Rayhan never texted again. He understood. That was always his strength. He didn't chase, didn't push. He had given her what she needed at the time. Someone who saw her when she forgot how to see herself. And when it ended, he let it. One afternoon, she spotted him. A crowded grocery aisle. He was reaching for a shelf. She froze. He turned, eyes meeting hers. No surprise. No anger. Just recognition. They didn't speak. They didn't smile. But the silence between them felt whole. A quiet acknowledgement of a chapter they'd both closed without tearing it out. He nodded once. She did too. Then walked away in opposite directions. That night, Nadia sat by her window, watching the city lights blur. The guilt hadn't vanished. It lingered in corners, reminded her of what she lost, and what she had allowed. But so did a strange clarity. She wasn't proud of her choices. But she was no longer pretending. She whispered a truth she had never said out loud. She had needed Rayhan. Not as a lover, but as a mirror. A brief, painful reflection of who she'd once been, and who she still could be. She wasn't healed. She wasn't whole. But she was honest, finally. That had to count for something. Sometimes the people who help you aren't meant to stay. They don't belong in your future. They just walk in when everything is falling apart, hold the pieces for a moment, then disappear. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt.